Foreign bodies. Pain returned before consciousness did. It arrived in waves, pulsing through my body, nerve endings screaming in protest. Then finally, awareness followed, fragmented and distorted. I opened my eyes. The room was sterile and white, bathed in harsh light that made my head throb. The restraints cut into my wrists and ankles, the cold metal unyielding against my skin. This was the 47th awakening, or perhaps the 48th. Time had become difficult to track between the blackouts. Memory flashed, being taken from my home, the confusion, the struggle, then this place, this room, these aliens. They would return soon. They always did. As if summoned by my dread, the door slid open. 3 of them entered, moving with that methodical confidence that still disturbed me. Their bodies were encased in white protective suits, only their hands exposed. Their faces were partially obscured by clear masks, but their eyes were visible, always watching. The tall one approached, manipulating a tablet in their hands. They spoke to the others, words that still sounded strange to my ears despite weeks of exposure. Subject shows increased neural response. The tall one announced. Previous tissue samples indicate accelerated adaptation to the controlled environment. The second figure stepped forward, producing a gleaming instrument that caught the light. My body instinctively tensed, muscles contracting in anticipation. They had used similar tools before. I knew what was coming. Try not to damage the respiratory system this time, said the third one, smaller than the others. We need it functional for the next phase. It. Always it. Never a person, never alive in their estimation. Just a specimen. The tall one placed a device against my temple. A sharp click, then fire spread through my skull. My consciousness splintered, retreating from the overwhelming pain. The last thing I registered before darkness claimed me was the smaller figure leaning closer, its face revealing what I had come to recognize as curiosity. Awakening came again, different this time. The pain was duller, more diffuse, as if my body had begun adapting to its constant presence. The room was darker. They had dimmed the lights, perhaps for observation purposes. My right arm felt strange. Looking down, I saw the incision they had made, now sealed with some kind of synthetic material. What had they taken this time? Alone for the moment, I performed a mental inventory. My senses seemed sharper. I could now make out some of the symbols on the walls. I had no way to tell how long I'd been here, but from the patterns of their appearances, I guessed about 3 weeks had passed since my capture. A slight movement in my left ankle drew my attention. The restraint there was different. Newer, perhaps, or designed differently. When I flexed my foot slightly, I felt an unexpected give in the mechanism. A malfunction? Or a deliberate change in their protocol? I remained still, conserving energy, waiting. They were methodical. They would return at their appointed time, perform their procedures, record their observations, and in the intervals between I would test that restraint, carefully, imperceptibly. Hope was dangerous. Hope would lead to carelessness. But hope was also the only thing keeping my sanity intact through the procedures. Neural response is muted today, said the tall figure, adjusting some settings on the device. Increase stimulus by 20%. The subsequent pain drove all rational thought from my mind. My body convulsed against the restraints, and I felt something crack in my chest. Fluid leaked into places where it shouldn't be. The sensation of drowning from within. Interesting reaction, noted the smaller figure, recording data on a luminous tablet. The internal structure is more fragile than we anticipated. Should we terminate for full dissection? Asked the third, a pause that stretched my terror to its limits. No, decided the tall one finally. There's more to learn from the living specimen. Repair the damage and continue the sensory mapping. They inserted something into the crack in my chest, a tool that burned as it sealed the breach. The pain was different now, localized and intense. My vision fragmented into overlapping images. I felt my consciousness slipping again, retreating from the trauma. The smaller figure's face came close to mine. Fascinating resilience, it said, and I detected what might have been admiration in its voice. It shouldn't still be alive. Darkness claimed me once more. 32 awakenings later, by my best estimation, the opportunity finally presented itself. They had been conducting some kind of psychological assessment, showing me images that seemed familiar yet wrong, recording my reactions. The smaller figure had remained behind after the others left, still making notations on its tablet. It had been doing this more frequently, staying alone with me, observing. Whether out of scientific curiosity or something more disturbing, I couldn't tell. When it finally moved toward the exit, it did something unprecedented. It looked directly at me, a behavior I had learned indicated significance, and then deliberately turned off one of the monitoring devices before leaving. The meaning was unclear, but the consequence was immediate. The restraint on my left ankle, which I had been gradually working loose over countless sessions, powered down completely. Whatever automated system controlled the restraints was partially deactivated. I waited, counting heartbeats. 100, 200. No alarm, no return of my captors. With excruciating slowness, I extracted my foot from the loosened restraint. Pain shot through atrophied muscles, but the freedom of movement was worth the discomfort. Using that limb, I was able to reach the control mechanism for the adjacent restraint. It took time filled with terror at every sound from beyond the room, but eventually I freed a second limb, then a third. Finally, I was able to rise from the examination table for the first time since my capture. Standing was agony. My balance was off and my legs threatened to buckle, but determination drove me forward, toward the door. It was sealed, but I had watched them operate it countless times. 3 contact points, activated in sequence. The door slid open. The hallway beyond was dimly lit and empty. I moved as quickly as my damaged body would allow, using the wall for support. I followed directional markings on the walls indicating exit, reasoning that they must lead outside the facility. Twice I had to hide in alcoves as figures passed by. They moved with purpose, unaware of my escape. The facility was vast, with numerous chambers containing equipment I couldn't comprehend. In one, I glimpsed what appeared to be others like me. Still and lifeless on examination tables, I forced myself to keep moving. I couldn't help them now. After navigating a maze of corridors, I reached a larger door marked with warning symbols about atmospheric transition. This had to be an exit point. The control panel was more complex than the one on my room. I studied it frantically, aware that my absence must have been discovered by now. A series of lights indicated some kind of security protocol. Using what I had learned of their patterns, I attempted to predict the correct sequence. On the third attempt, the door unsealed with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond it lay darkness, night in this world, and the promise of freedom. I stumbled through, my weakened legs carrying me across unfamiliar terrain. The air burned in my lungs, but less severely than before. Perhaps their experiments had indeed adapted my body to this hostile environment. A bitter irony if that violation now enabled my survival. The landscape was strange. Jagged structures silhouetted against a sky with unfamiliar stars. In the distance, lights indicated more of their settlements. I needed to find cover, to hide until I could figure out my next move. Behind me, alarms began to sound from the facility. They had discovered my absence. I forced my damaged body to move faster, heading toward a dense cluster of what looked like trees. They would provide concealment, at least temporarily. As I reached the cover of the strange vegetation, I risked a look back at the facility. It was larger than I had realized, extending both above and below the surface. Figures were emerging now, carrying flashlights, beginning to spread out in search patterns. One of them was moving in my direction, closing ground quickly. I pressed deeper into the vegetation, trying to control my rapid breathing. The figure passed close by, sweeping its light through the foliage. For a moment, its beam illuminated its face clearly. Without the transparent mask it wore in the chamber, I could see its features fully for the first time. The eyes, the nose, the mouth, set in what I had come to identify as determination. The figure moved past my hiding place, continuing its search elsewhere. I remained motionless, conserving energy, planning my next move. I would need to find a way back to my people, to warn them about this place, these creatures, their ruthless curiosity. As the first light of dawn began to illuminate this strange landscape, I caught sight of my reflection in a puddle of liquid. The experiments had changed me more than I had realized. My body was different, altered by their procedures. Parts of me had been removed, replaced, modified. But I was still myself, still a navigator from the 5th Colony Fleet, still an explorer, and now a survivor. I would find a way home. I would tell them what I had learned about these beings who had torn me apart to understand how I worked, who had treated me as an object, a specimen, a thing to be studied. As I moved deeper into the foreign terrain, away from the facility and its searching humans, a terrible truth crystallized in my mind. In all our exploration of the stars, we had never encountered anything as strange, as utterly fundamentally different as these humans. And they called me the alien.
Every story has an end, but there's always another waiting to be told. Subscribe to Steve's Stories for more sci-fi, dystopian, and war-driven adventures, from short tales to full novels. Like the video, hit the bell, and join me on this journey through worlds unknown.